Formula One just admitted failure, after only 4 races. The 50-50 engine concept, gone. Replaced by a 60-40 split that completely changes how these cars produce power, shifting everything back toward combustion, and away from electric energy. And this isn't just a technical tweak. This is a full reset of the rules, one that instantly weakens some teams, and quietly boosts others before they even touch the car. We're talking about speed differences of up to 50 km per hour on the same straight, caused by a system that simply couldn't work in real racing conditions. Now that system is being abandoned. And inside the paddock, the reaction is explosive, because this single change could decide who dominates the next era of Formula One. The real question is, who just lost everything, and who just got handed the future? To understand why this decision hit so hard, you have to go back to the original idea behind the 50-50 concept, because on paper, it looked almost perfect. Half combustion, half electric. A clean split, a modern identity, a statement about where Formula One wanted to go. It wasn't just engineering, it was philosophy. The sport wanted to become the ultimate showcase of hybrid technology. Faster, more efficient, more relevant to the real world. And for a moment, it actually made sense. 2 power sources working together, perfectly balanced. One providing constant force, the other delivering bursts of energy when needed. Like having 2 engines in one car, both equally important. But here's where reality stepped in. Because that balance only worked in theory. In practice, the electric side became too aggressive, too dominant in short bursts, and too fragile over time. Imagine using your phone on maximum brightness, with every app open, draining the battery in seconds. It feels powerful, until it suddenly dies. That's exactly what was happening inside these cars. The electric system would deliver massive power on the straights, and then disappear almost instantly, leaving the driver with only half the performance they had just seconds before. And that's where the real problem begins. Because racing isn't static. It's not just about your car. It's about the car next to you. If one driver has full battery, and the other doesn't, the difference isn't small. It's massive. We're talking about speed gaps that can reach up to 50 km per hour, on the same straight, at the same moment. That's not a detail. That's chaos. Because suddenly, overtaking isn't just about skill. It's about who has energy left, and who doesn't. Drivers described it as unpredictable, unnatural, even dangerous. And here's the key point. This wasn't a rare issue. It was happening constantly. Lap after lap. Straight after straight. The battery drains in a few seconds, the power drops, the car behind flies past. And then the roles reverse. Over and over again. And that creates something Formula One cannot accept. A system where performance changes too quickly, too dramatically, without warning. Because at that point, the driver is no longer in full control. The system is. And that's where the FIA realized something critical. This wasn't just a tuning issue. It wasn't something you could fix with small adjustments. Because they tried. Software updates. Energy management tweaks. Minor corrections. But those changes only fixed a fraction of the problem, around 20% at best. The rest remained exactly the same. And that's the moment everything shifted. Because once you realize the problem is built into the system itself, there's only one option left. You don't adjust it, you replace it. And that's exactly what the FIA decided to do. But what comes next is where the real consequences begin. And this is where the story takes a turn that nobody inside Formula One can ignore, because replacing the system is one thing, but what they replaced it with changes everything. The 60-40 split. At first, it sounds like a small adjustment. Just a shift in percentages. But in reality, it completely rewrites how these cars behave. More power goes back to the combustion engine. Less reliance on the electric system. And that single change solves the biggest issue almost immediately. Because now, when the battery runs out, the drop in performance isn't as brutal. You don't lose half the car. You lose a smaller portion of it. The difference between cars becomes more manageable, more predictable, safer. Instead of extreme speed gaps, those massive 50 km per hour differences start to shrink into something drivers can actually control. And that's the key. Control returns to the driver, instead of the system. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the total power of the car doesn't change. The cars are still just as fast. Same overall output. Same potential on track. What changes is how that power is delivered. Think of it like 2 people carrying the same weight. One carries it evenly. The other shifts most of it to one side. The total is the same, but the balance feels completely different. And in Formula One, balance is everything. Because teams didn't just build engines. They built entire concepts around that 50-50 idea. cooling systems designed for heavy electrical use, energy management software optimized for maximum deployment, strategies built around when to use battery and when to save it. All of that now becomes less important, or at least less dominant. And that's where the real tension begins. Because some teams mastered that system. They built their advantage on the electric side. Years of data, thousands of hours refining how to deploy energy perfectly. And now, that advantage shrinks. Not completely gone, but reduced, less decisive, less powerful in the overall picture. While at the same time, other teams benefit without even changing anything yet. Teams that struggled with the electric side, but had stronger combustion engines, more consistent power delivery, better stability. Now suddenly, that strength matters more, which means the gap closes naturally, before a single upgrade is even introduced. And this is why the reaction across the paddock isn't just frustration, it's urgency. Because this change forces every team to rethink everything. Fuel flow increases, which means more fuel consumption, which means redesigning fuel tanks, rebalancing weight distribution, changing how the car behaves over a race distance. More combustion power also means more heat, which means new cooling systems, new airflow management, new compromises in aerodynamics. And at the same time, the electric system becomes less dominant, which means the entire software strategy has to be rewritten from scratch. This isn't an upgrade. This is a reset. A full redesign of one of the most complex machines in sport. And it all comes from one simple truth. The original idea could not survive real racing conditions. But here's the part that makes this even more intense. Because while teams are trying to adapt, some are already positioned perfectly for this new reality. And that's where the balance of power starts to shift, before anyone even turns a wheel. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because once you look at who benefits from this shift, the reaction across the grid suddenly makes perfect sense. Because not all engines were built equally. Some manufacturers invested heavily in the electric side. They focused on energy recovery, deployment, software precision, squeezing every possible advantage out of that 50%. And for a brief moment, it worked. They became incredibly efficient. Incredibly fast, when the battery was full. But now, that entire advantage is worth less. Because the electric system no longer defines the car. It supports it. And that's a completely different role. Which means the teams that built their dominance around that system are now forced to adapt. Fast. But here's where the balance shifts even more. Because other manufacturers took a different path. They focused more on the combustion engine. More stability. More consistent power. Less reliance on short bursts of energy, and more on sustained performance. And under the old rules, that approach looked weaker. Outdated, even. But under the new 60-40 split, it becomes an advantage. Without changing a single component, those engines are suddenly more competitive. Because the part they were already strong in, now matters more. And this is where the tension turns into something deeper. Because this isn't just about performance. It's about timing. Some teams spent years optimizing for a rule that is now being reduced in importance. Others are being rewarded for a philosophy that didn't fully work before. And in Formula One, that kind of shift feels brutal. Because development isn't instant. You can't just redesign an engine overnight. You can't rewrite years of engineering in a few months. And that's why the reaction inside the paddock isn't just frustration. It's pressure. Because every team now faces the same reality. Adapt or fall behind. But here's the part that makes this even more intense. Because this change doesn't happen in isolation. It overlaps with everything else. New engine cycles. New car designs. New aerodynamic concepts. Which means the teams that react fastest won't just gain a small edge. They could define the entire next era. And that's exactly what makes this moment so important. Because while some teams are still trying to understand what they've lost, others are already thinking about how to exploit what they've gained. And in a sport where margins are measured in tenths, that difference in reaction time can decide championships. But there's still one final piece that connects everything. Because this change wasn't just about performance. It was about survival. About bringing the cars back under control. Making them predictable again. Giving drivers confidence instead of uncertainty. And that tells you something deeper about where Formula One is heading. It tried to push too far, too fast. And now, it's correcting itself. But in doing so, it may have just reshuffled the entire competitive order. So now the question isn't just who benefits today. It's much bigger than that. Who understood this shift first, and who is already building the car that will dominate because of it? And this is where everything finally connects, because the real impact of this decision isn't what teams lose today. It's what someone gains tomorrow. Because while most of the grid is reacting, adjusting, trying to recover from a rule that just shifted under their feet, a few teams are already aligned with this new reality. Not by luck, by design. Because if your engine was already stronger on the combustion side, if your philosophy was built around stability instead of aggressive electrical deployment, then this change doesn't force you to rebuild. It accelerates you. And that's a completely different position to be in. Because instead of fixing weaknesses, you're refining strengths. Instead of catching up, you're moving forward. And that's where the danger appears. Because Formula One is not won by reacting. It's won by anticipating. By being ready before the opportunity even exists. And right now, that opportunity has just been created. A shift toward combustion. A reduction in electric dependency. A system that rewards consistency over short bursts of power. And for some teams, that aligns perfectly with what they were already building. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because this change doesn't just affect engines. It affects the entire car. More combustion power means more heat. More fuel flow means more weight. More weight means changes in balance, tire wear, and race strategy. Everything connects. Everything evolves together. And that means the teams that understand this shift holistically, not just at engine level, will move ahead faster than anyone expects. Because they won't just adapt one component. They'll redesign the entire concept around it. And that's how dominance begins in Formula One. Not with one breakthrough, but with a series of connected advantages, all moving in the same direction. And this is where the timeline becomes crucial. Because while the regulation targets the next cycle, development starts now. Decisions are already being made. Concepts are already being locked in. And once those decisions are set, they define everything that follows. There's no reset after that. No second chance. Which means one thing. Some teams are already ahead, and nobody can see it yet. Because the real race isn't happening on track. It's happening behind closed doors. In design rooms. In simulations. In quiet decisions that won't be visible until the cars appear. And by then, it might already be too late to respond. So when teams react with frustration, when they question the change, it's not just about losing an advantage. It's about realizing that someone else might already be building the future, faster than they are. And that brings everything back to one final point. This wasn't just a correction. It was an admission. An admission that the direction of the sport had gone too far, and needed to be pulled back. But in doing that, Formula One didn't just fix a problem. It created a new opportunity. And the teams that recognize that first, won't just benefit from this change. They'll define what comes next. So now the real question isn't who lost with the end of the 50-50 era. It's much more important than that. Who saw the 60-40 era coming, and is already building the car that no one else will be able to catch?